So people sometimes ask, what role does apologetics really play in evangelism? Shouldn't you just preach the gospel, or do you really need to do all this study of worldviews and so on? And I'm excited to be able to say that you don't need to choose, that the Bible itself gives the basis for worldviews. Because in Romans 1, Paul is giving tips on how to build an evangelistic strategy based on general revelation. Okay, special revelation means the Bible, and general revelation means what we can figure out about God from His creation. And most of the time when we think of general revelation, we think of the beauty of nature and the evidence for God from nature. But it's also us, human beings. We actually give the best evidence for God because we're personal beings. That is to say, because we are beings who have the power of choice, the first cause that created us must have a will. Because we are beings with power of thinking, the first cause that created us must have a mind. As one Christian philosopher puts it, because we are someone and not a something, the first cause that created us must also be a someone, a personal being, and not the non-personal forces of nature. Like materialism or naturalism would say we're just products of natural forces. Well, no, we have to be the product of a someone. And of course, this was Francis Schaeffer's main argument too. He used the term personal and non-personal. Because we are personal beings, there must be a personal being that created us. And non-personal forces, like the forces of nature, are just not adequate to account for the existence of human beings. And so how does that fit into Romans 1? Well, in Romans 1, Paul says, if you do not worship, anyone does not worship the biblical creator, he will have to worship something in the created order. He will exchange the glory of God for something in the created order. And of course, these days, it's not usually a golden calf, but it will be something else in the created order, because what else is there? If there's not God, there's creation. Those are your two options. And so think of something like matter. Is matter part of the created order? Sure it is. And so materialism qualifies as an idol in the biblical sense, because what it's saying is materialism says the ultimate source of everything is matter. The uncaused cause of everything else, the ultimate reality is matter. And so it's putting matter in the place of God. And so it qualifies as an idol in the biblical sense. So, let's take materialism, for example, because that is the major worldview in the academics world today, materialism or naturalism. In fact, one philosopher at USC says, naturalism is the religion of our times, at least in the academic world. So let's talk about matter. Materialism is matter is all that exists. Naturalism is nature is all that exists. So they're basically the same thing. Well, once you decide that your idol is matter, then that determines everything else that you think is real. It's like having a box, and anything that fits in the box of matter is real. Whatever doesn't fit in the box is not real. And that's why materialists will say there's no such thing as a soul, or spirit, or mind, or free will, or moral choice, or even consciousness. Well, that also gives you a way to test truth claims. Because then you can say, well, is that true? Is it true that the only thing that's real is what fits into the box of materialism? Is it true that there's no such thing as mind, consciousness, or free will? So people like Richard Dawkins say we're just survival machines. He also says we're just complex robots. So you can ask, is that true? Are we just robots? Well, obviously not, because we make choices from the minute we wake up in the morning. There's only two options. There's the transcendent personal God who created the universe, or there's something in the created universe. And if it's something in the created universe, it will always be too small. Your God will always be too small. It will always be too small to account for the full range of reality. Just like the materialist box was too small. It couldn't account for most of the things that make life meaningful, like moral choice and love and emotions and freedom and so on. Every worldview out there, because it fastens on part of creation, will never be big enough to explain the whole. If you start with part of creation, let me say it again. If you start with a part of creation, you can be utterly confident that it will never be big enough to explain the whole.